when he does show up for these debates, is good old South Dakota common sense. I mean, we're essentially selling green cards to allow people to cut to the front of the line, and it's not just people; it's foreign big money coming into the state. And now we have this mess on our hands, and it's really unfortunate. Senator Pressler made a comment at the Dakota Fest debate a few weeks ago that we do need to get to the bottom of this before November 4th, and I agree with that. And now we have more questions than answers. And again, Mike's not here tonight to address it. I mean, I'm beginning to wonder why, outside of our difference on selling citizenship to the highest bidder, that maybe there's something a lot more to this that we're never going to see until after the election, and that would be a real disservice to the people of South Dakota.
Mr. Howie, 60 seconds if you would like it.
Well, yes, I would. Mike Rounds has a clear opportunity here to clean the slate and let South Dakota voters really see what happened with this EB5 scandal. I've called on Mike Rounds. I disagree with Larry that a memorandum of fact would solve the problems. I don't think that's sufficient. Mike Rounds needs to agree to testify under oath so he can be vindicated if he should be vindicated, or chastised if he should be chastised. But we need to see that information prior to this election so voters can make an informed, competent decision. And frankly, Mike Rounds should also release his emails between his office and Ballin and Benda and other EB5 conspirators or whatever you want to call them. And he should also release his appointment calendar so we could see what really happened, what he really did, when he did it, and who he talked to when he talked to them. I think that's only fair, and that's the way we'll discover the truth, when people will testify under oath. Right now, the Republican leadership is stonewalling every effort, and they're protecting something or trying to hide something. Mike, you need to come forward and answer questions.
Mr. Howie, thank you. Our next question tonight deals with the dynamic that we have in this race. We have two independents running for this Senate seat, and while South Dakota has an independent streak that's a mile long, both Gordon Howie and Larry Pressler are being criticized for muddying the water in this race. Our latest Survey South Dakota poll, released just last night, shows just 11 percentage points between Mike Rounds and rick-weiland. Mr. Pressler, that same poll shows if you weren't in this race, it would be a virtual dead heat between Mike Rounds and rick-weiland. But, Mr. Weiland, high-ranking Democrats, among them Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, say they don't believe that you can win this race. Gentlemen, point blank tonight, why are your critics wrong? Why will you win this election in November? Mr. Pressler, 90 seconds.
Yes, well, our law provides for independent candidates, and I would be the fourth. So we would be at the fulcrum between this poisonous dispute, and I think that we could help Washington get more things done, especially on the deficit. And I think the deficit is the #1 threat to agriculture, to national defense, and to lots of other areas. So I'm proud to run as an independent, and we're going to make some real change in America and in South Dakota. It would be refreshing for South Dakota to elect an independent to the Senate with this duopoly one-party situation we have in Pierre that has led to the corruption that we have in our state.
Mr. Weiland, 60 seconds. Why are your critics wrong?
Well, first of all, I don't think they can appreciate the past 16 months of traveling to every town in South Dakota and sitting down in the living rooms and the kitchens, the cafes, the senior centers, and just listening and showing up and talking to the people of South Dakota. South Dakota's got a streak of sending Democrats to Washington. George McGovern, Tom Daschle, Tim Johnson, Stephanie Herseth. And I really do believe that getting out there and talking to the voters is a lot more important than shaking down big money out of state. I don't know where Mike is tonight, but he's not here. And I really think that, as I said earlier, people want someone who is going to show up on the floor of the United States Senate and have their best interests at heart. That will be out there fighting for them, not for the special interests. So, maybe I've rubbed my national party wrong. That's okay, too, because I can claim I'm independent of the national party in terms of winning and running this race. I'm running for the people of South Dakota. I'm going to fight for the people of South Dakota. I'm going to show up every day fighting and working for them and not big money.
Mr. Howie, 60 seconds. Why are your critics wrong?
Well, polling data is an interesting subject. If you asked Eric Cantor how he was doing the day before the election, his polling data showed that he was at 75%. The next day he suffered a significant upset. I find it very interesting that most of the polling data is collected in South Dakota on this race, mentions the three other candidates, and then undecided. Doesn't even mention my name. I'm not sure why or what their methodology is in that regard, but what I would say is you can't have an accurate poll when you don't even mention all of the names. I'm in this race because I believe South Dakota needs a conservative Republican alternative. I'm a lifelong Republican. I'm running as an independent because the Rounds machine money bought the primary, and the conservative vote was so fractured no one could get any traction. I am a strong proponent of life. I opposed the Rounds tax increases. In fact, I was the only Republican senator in the state Senate in 2010 to vote against then Governor Rounds' 2010 budget, because it increased spending an additional $10 million over the previous year and led to his $127 million deficit. South Dakota needs a conservative choice. That's why I'm in this race, and that's why we can win it. And
Mr. Howie, for clarification, in our recent survey South Dakota poll, you were included in that polling and came in at 3%. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. That's so kind of you.
You bet. Thank you, sir. Mr. Pressler, 60 seconds if you would like it.
Well, let me clarify one thing, and that I agree with my friend Gordon on the issue of a sworn statements from Governor Rounds, if we could get them, but we've only got 50 days. All of this prosecution is going to happen next year. That's what people should understand. So the best we can hope for is some kind of a memorandum or some kind of a declaration by the governor as to what the facts are. I just wanted to point that out. Also, in terms of independence in the Senate, the recent Veterans Bill was passed by an independent United States Senator who chaired the Veterans Committee and in record time passed the Veterans Bill. So independence can be very effective there in the Senate. And there are 2 there now, and we are hoping for 4, and that will provide a balance or to break loose the poisonous deadlock that we cannot balance the budget. And the deficit is one of my biggest concerns, and I would balance it by both a reduction in some of our overseas wasteful, obsolete military spending and some revenue enhancement by eliminating some corporate deductions that are merely corporate subsidies. Also, let's remember that Republican senators tend to vote for higher deficits because they vote for corporate subsidies and unlimited military spending, but especially corporate subsidies.
And Mr. Pressler, that is time. We're going to talk for a moment about campaign financing here. Now, Mr. Weiland, you in particular have made a point in your advertising to talk about the role that big money can play in a campaign. So, gentlemen, our question is twofold tonight. To date, who is the largest contributor to your campaign? And how do we reduce the role of big money in politics? And Mr. Weiland, 90 seconds. We'll begin with you.
Well, first of all, when I got into this race, I wrote my own constitutional amendment to essentially overturn Citizens United. That debate has been going on in Washington this week, and unfortunately, it didn't pass. But the Tom Udall amendment from New Mexico would have basically done what I've been talking about for almost 16 months. Big money's running the show in Washington, and I tell you what, we can take it back. I really do believe that, because I don't think, for the most part, members of Congress want to be professional fundraisers, but those are the rules. I asked Mike Rounds early on in this campaign if he'd be willing to limit contributions to $100. He turned me down cold. I asked him if he could get together, just the 2 of us, and see if we could work out a way to keep the dark money, the super PACs, from coming in and trying to buy this Senate seat. He didn't even respond. And obviously he's not here tonight, so who knows where he is. He's probably raising money somewhere in the country. But you know what? Citizens United was a bad thing for this country. So was McCutcheon versus the FEC, which was another recent decision that basically took all the limits off. Now, Senator Pressler likes to kind of have it both ways, but if you do your research, I know when he was in the United States Senate, he voted against campaign finance reform. But maybe he's had an epiphany too. But big money's the problem. It's calling the shots when it comes to health care reform. It's calling the shots when it comes to financial services reform. It's calling the shots when it comes to energy policy. And if you follow the money, and where it's coming from, you'll see who Mike Rounds is lined up with, and you'll see who I've lined up with. I mean, most of my contributions are very small and average in the scheme of things, and they're nothing like the $9 million that Mike Rounds has been boasting about raising.
Do you know who your largest contributor is to date?
I have maxed out contributors that give $5,200, and there are several of them, but that's for both the primary and the general election. But they're South Dakotans, and they're people from other parts of the country. The thing that I was most interested in is I'm willing to send all that back too, if we can level the playing field. But I wasn't going to unilaterally disarm, and I told Mike that when he turned me down cold. I mean, that would just be like giving this seat to big money. So I'm going to, I'll play by the rules he wants to play by, but I'm not going to tie both hands behind my back.
Mr. Howie, 60 seconds, your largest contributor to date and how we get big money out of politics.
Well, I'd like to give you an opportunity to be my largest contributor tonight, so I'll let you write a check before I leave the studio.
I could not do that, sir.
Frankly, I couldn't tell you who my largest contributor is either, but it wouldn't be very impressive because we don't have a lot of large contributors. I hear a lot of complaining about big money in politics, and I'll join the bandwagon there and complain about big money in politics until maybe I start getting some of it. I would suggest that right now, Mike Rounds is boasted of going to raise $9 million, and Rick is, I don't know if he's raised $2 million, maybe $3 million, I don't know, certainly between 1 and 2, maybe you've got a better idea. But what I would say is that big money isn't a problem in my campaign because we certainly haven't had big contributions. We haven't taken any PAC money that I'm aware of, and so it's all individuals who are giving to our campaign.
Mr. Pressler, 60 seconds, your largest contributor and how we get big money out of politics.
Yes, my largest contributor is Dr. Ron Smith, $2,600. And I've raised less than $100,000 in this campaign so far. A lot of my contributions have been $150. People in South Dakota will have a chance to vote for a true grassroots campaign this fall. As an independent, I don't get the big special interest money that my Republican and Democratic opponents do. But I need you, the people, to send me some contributions. Go to larry-pressler.com and you can send a contribution, and you will be part of a group of small $150 and $200 contributors. I will have about 1% as much money as either the Republican or the Democratic nominees. So we need to make a special effort to get our message out. Homemade yard signs, homemade bumper stickers are needed, but volunteers are needed. larry-pressler.com. I need your help.
Mr. Weiland, 60 seconds if you would like it.
Well, first of all, I'd say rick-weiland.com works as well. I go back to the beginning of this race, for Mike Rounds to boast about making or raising $9 million and then and saying publicly that he was going to spend, most of his time out of state doing it, tells you the difference between the two major party candidates here. Again, I'll point out that when Senator Pressler was in the United States Senate, he didn't support campaign finance reform. I believe that this issue is probably the single most important thing we need to deal with in this country, because we're not going to get good health care reform because of the big insurance companies that Mike lines up with. We're not going to get a good energy policy that's focused on renewable fuels and conservation because of the big oil companies that have been running the government when it comes to energy policy, and Mike's lined up with them. So you've got a real stark contrast between the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate when it comes to money in politics. It's on the back of my business card. So when I receive a $2,600 contribution from out of state, they know the first thing I'm going to do is to run big money out of this political system so we can take our government back.
Mr. Howie, do you have a website?
Yeah, thanks for asking. GordonHowieForSenate.com, and we'll be open for business all night.
Gentlemen, let's talk about the economy for a moment here. The U.S. economic recession ended roughly 5 years ago. National unemployment is right around 6%. A new government report released last week says the U.S. has added over 2 million jobs over the last year. Those are good things, no doubt. But companies are increasingly hiring temporary or part-time workers instead of full-time employees. Nearly 10 million people are still out of work tonight. And an Associated Press survey finds typical employee pay is increasing by less than 2% per year. So our question, do you believe the U.S. economy has fully recovered from the recession? Mr. Howie, you have 90 seconds.
My first impression is to say, are you